So, hello everyone, and welcome back to Fugitive Chefs, the show where we talk to chefs and food people in general who have stepped away from traditional restaurant kitchens or never chosen to be in traditional restaurant kitchens in the first place to create something more personal, independent, and most of the times more creatively fulfilling. Today's guest is Sormeh, so welcome to the podcast, Sormeh, first of all.
Thank you. I want to say hello to everyone who's listening. I'm Sormeh and I'm looking very forward for this podcast.
Sormeh, yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
From what I know about Sormeh, she's a private chef and also a supper club host, which is also an interesting concept we like to speak about. I think a supper club started years ago, mostly in the state, then got big regionally in many places. But still, it's something which I think still has its own niche of something so exclusive. And I think the exclusivity of a supper club is what makes it that people want to dine into a concept like that. And she's built her career around it, and I've seen some of her Instagram posts, and that's actually how the first place I came to know about Sormeh through one of her reels, which popped up on my algorithm of the podcast page actually. And I was very interested in the work that she does around storytelling, hospitality, also tricks that she was sharing around how these supper clubs work, the recipes she shares, and it kind of matches the point of the podcast that you don't really need a restaurant, you don't really need a massive investment behind, you don't need a structure of the typical restaurant to kind of have your voice or like create the magic that you can do through food. So I would say this is a podcast for anybody who's listening and maybe working in restaurants, maybe you're freshly coming out of school and you were very much into the idea that you have to be in restaurants or have to find an investor who opens a restaurant for you to prove yourself or to show people what kind of food you can cook or how you can make that your career. So I think Sormeh is going to definitely show us an alternative to that she's built. But before we dive deep into all of that, Sormeh, tell us about the beginning. Like, what was your first connection to food? Was there a person, place, memory, anything of sorts that shaped how you think about cooking as a profession today?
I mean, as long as I remember, I was really passionate about cooking and I was always a foodie. But when I'm thinking about my first connection, I think I was about 13 or 14. And at that time, my parents got separated. And for me, like cooking and being in the kitchen was sort of like this safe space. And it was really therapeutic for me. And it made me like not think about anything. And it was sort of the escape from my personal life. And at that time, it really helped me get through a really like tough time in my life, a tough period of my life. And at that moment in Iran, we didn't have like a lot of products and ingredients. For example, we didn't have different kind of cheeses like burrata or ricotta or fresh pastas and these sort of things. And something inside me was like, okay, maybe I can make them from scratch. And at that age, I started to experimenting and like making burrata from scratch for the first time. And I was like, okay, this is something that I'm really, it gives me so much joy. And I think that was my first connection with food when I think of it.
Yeah, and like starting from that, and coming from a necessity of having to learn all these things from scratch just because you don't have it around you. Was there an idea of like this could be a career, or that point was just like I want to make my ends meet and I want to have something I'm looking at it which is not reachable for me, or was there an idea to make that a profession, or when did that idea come into your head?
You know, the funny thing is that I never wanted to do this for a living and I never wanted to make a career out of food or I never wanted to be a chef. The thing is, I mean, cooking was like this really joyful thing for me. And I always thought that if I made it into a career, it would complicate things. It would complicate things and
Mm.
it would take away the joy. So when I also like, I don't know if you know or not, but I studied industrial engineering in university. And after that, I
Wow.
studied interior design. And at the moment that I started my very first supper club, I actually was working it and I wanted to become an interior designer and I was working in that path. So and I also remember that a lot of people had told me that you should definitely have a restaurant or you should definitely do something with cooking. But it was not, it was something that was not on my mind. And I never wanted to do that because as I said, it was something that I really loved. And I was afraid if I made it into a career, it would take away the joy.
Yeah, definitely. And how does that idea, like, where does that idea come from? Like, what is your exposure? Just to tell us a little bit about somebody growing up in Iran who has an idea of like cooking and they enjoy cooking. How common is it? Like, how big are culinary schools? How big is culinary jobs? Like, being a chef as a profession? What's the image of being a chef in Iranian society, for example? Because I'm only asking out of curiosity because I have no
Yeah.
idea what it is like.
I mean,
Like,
it's
what would be your parents' reaction if you said you wanted to study being a chef instead of, say, your industrial engineering?
I mean, my parents were not like this, but a lot of parents in Iran want their
Hmm.
children to be like doctors or engineers. And like being a chef or being in the food industry is not something like parents would wish for their children. So
Uh-huh.
it's like not very common, and it's not sort of like a very big career money making job in Iran. Like in this past few
Hmm.
years, it's been evolving a lot and it's getting much better. Like people are giving it more credit, and right now, currently, they're giving more credit to having food experience and these sort of things. So like it's evolving, but it's still not like we don't have a lot of like good culinary schools. We have good
Hmm.
universities for being an engineer or these sort of things. So I think it's not like the perfect thing. It's not the perfect job to have in Iran.
Interesting. And like going a little off road from this whole podcast, which is about you, and we'll get there. But just to know a little more about Iranian cuisine, I mean, itself is a, I mean, a lot of cuisines around the whole Silk Road and the I think Eurasia has come through a lot of things from the Persian cuisine. A lot of food that in my own country in India we have samosa, biryani, all of that come from their origins
Yeah.
in Persia. So how is that side of cooking? Like, I mean, there is always these societies have a respect for traditional cooking, and the food is the center of all conversations. But it's interesting for me to know that it's still not an ideal career. But how is the role of, like, are there celebrity chefs? Are there cooking shows? Is there like an elitist class of Persians or Iranians who have, I don't know, fine dining restaurants and things like that? Or how new is all that over in Iran?
I mean, the food culture in Iran is like really big and it's like really impressive. Like the food that we have, as you said, is because of the Silk Road. We have we actually have a lot of similar dishes to Indians as well. But I mean, we definitely have like some cooking shows, but I don't remember any. Like it's not something that we watch often on
Mm.
TV. As I said, like in the past few years, I think like the past decade maybe, it's sort of evolving and it's like getting better and it's elevating. Currently, we have like, and you know the thing is in Iran, like one of the things that you can do is just go to a restaurant because we don't have like clubs or bars or anything. So like the
Right.
first thing that comes to
Right.
our minds is like we have to go to a restaurant. So we have a lot of good
Of
restaurants in
course.
Iran actually, and we have a lot of great chefs, and it's getting better by day, and I think it's going in a really good path, and I think it's gonna get better each day. But as I said, it's not like a job that it's really like common. Yeah.
Understandable. And Sormeh, when like and like knowing what that all that you've shared right now, right? So there is a culture of food. There are people who have restaurants. There are people who have a system around doing things like this and hosting people, especially in a restaurant setting. So from that to you having an idea while doing a full-time job to have, say, host a supper club, what are the first fears you had? Like for me, this is very interesting to know because these could be the fears the people who are listening are sharing, that how do I put my name on a menu, or how do I kind of sell myself, because it's a very difficult conversation with yourself when you have a stable career, firstly, when you're not doing it for the living, but you're doing it because it's a passion you have, you think you do it well, you want to share it with others. What were the first fears you had? Was it like, how do I run a business like this, or how do I market this event, or will I know how to play numbers? Maybe I'm good at cooking for my family, but can I do that for 12 people? So what kind of fears did you go through at that point?
I mean, a lot of fears, but the thing is that me and my friends were sort of like in a community, so we spend a lot of money on food, as I said, because it's like one of the hobbies that we usually do. It was and I always love to like gather people around at my house, and I always like hosted for like a lot more than 12 people. So I was really confident in that part. But the thing was, the challenge that I have and the fear that I have was that a lot of people didn't know what a supper club is. I mean, honestly, I neither did I when I was starting it. And after I graduated from the industrial engineering and I was working to be an interior designer, I was just like, okay, so I love to like gather people around on my food, and I always like to put a theme on it. For example, Mexican nights, taco nights, pizza nights. And I was like, okay, let's just for a hobby and to just cover the costs and everything. Maybe I could just purchase to do this like in a platform where people like buy tickets, so it would cover the costs, and in that way, I'm sorry, in that way I can do like the thing that I love, but at the same time I can like cover the costs. But as I mentioned, it was just something really joyful to me, and I never thought that it would grow this big, and I never thought that after 2 years I would be standing in the place that I am. But yeah, but I really worked a lot to define the meaning of supper club to people. And after a short amount of time, I saw other people starting their own supper clubs in Iran. And that was really joyful for me. Like
Hmm.
people were like, aren't you mad? Like they're copying you. And I was like, I feel so powerful that I
Yeah, yeah.
brought an idea to Iran that it didn't exist before, and now people are starting their own businesses. I mean, that's really great, and it's really like really nice for me to see that people are doing these sort of things, and they're not just seeing food to fill their stomach; they're seeing it as an experience or doing these sort of things with food, and that's really like, I mean, I've done my job.
No, that's I mean that's the best kind of impact you can see. When people are doing the stuff that you started in the first place. And asking more about it, Sormeh, like what is the experience? Like what are these magic ingredients you would say that a supper club has to have? Because again, it's not just food. Because I mean, you go to a restaurant, you possibly order something, and you get the food, and you might not even see the person who's cooking it for you. Whereas in a supper club, it's much more intimate. So, what would you say are the few things you need to, or other things that you check for in a good supper club?
I mean, I think the most important thing is the community of people that come to that supper club. Because, like, if the people are sort of like they cannot connect, the night wouldn't go as much as nice as you imagine. So I think the first thing is to sort of like have that community, because supper club is one of the few places where you can meet new people and you can find new friends. So for that to happen, you have to have sort of like, that's why we call it a club. You sort of have to have like community of people that are sort of similar, but they don't necessarily know each other all the time. So I think that the first and most important thing is the community of the people that you have in your members club. The other thing is like paying attention to the details, the atmosphere and the ambiance that when they come into your home, or if it's a small studio that you host your supper clubs in, that's really important because you don't know the host. You may not know the host. So you have to feel at home. You have to be in a good atmosphere that you can enjoy and feel comfortable to talk to new people. So I think like if you just keep these things in your mind, you can just definitely like start a very good and successful supper club. And the thing is, you just have to start it, because when you start it, you sort of go like you sort of whenever you're like going into this path, like the path will open its way to you. You don't have to figure everything out like in the beginning. Like when you're doing it, it sort of like comes to you. You have more experience. You find out the troubles that you had, and you ace them and you perfect them, and for the next supper club you can use them and make the next one better. So it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to start it and go for it, and just learn from your mistakes and make them better.
Yeah, no, super. I mean, super interesting all that you've said. And I'm also curious over here, like reaching where we have that with a supper club like yours, where I mean, definitely the first supper clubs you did to the ones you do today after 2 years, your experience has built, you have more confidence to kind of create these themes and the menus. But how do you count that the factor of pricing in these menus? Like, because for example, with restaurants, I see a lot of restaurants. I mean, I see a lot of supper clubs, for example, or private caterings, being a little shy with prices because, again, with a restaurant, you always have consistency, or you can go on Google reviews, you can talk to people who've had over there. With supper clubs, instead, most probably you're going with kind of trusting the person who's hosting will have created a menu for you. You're not really choosing your dishes. So it again becomes difficult to package all these things which you're specially creating for this limited set of people with a lot of limitations of not having a professional kitchen. So what is that? Is there a struggle between the pricing and the kind of hopes people have? Do you like matching those expectations? How do you see that side of things with these kind of setups?
I mean, obviously, we have a lot of problems because of the things happening in Iran as well, like the price of the dollar increasing every day. So economically, like Iran is not doing great. So it's really hard to have these sort of things and experiences because the majority of people are like struggling to even have a meal at the end of the night. Of course, like this is not for like all the people in the capital of Iran, which is Tehran, and that makes me of course that makes me really sad that it's not, but you're sort of like making like you're targeting the community that they like make them, maybe they can easily like buy the ticket. But for the first supper club that I hosted, my price was like really low. It didn't, I think it didn't even cover the cost of the night, but it was sort of like a marketing strategy that I had, because I know that a lot of people didn't know what a supper club is. So I have to like start with a minimum price and increase it throughout the supper clubs that I hosted. And throughout the years. I mean, of course, it increased, but still at this moment, I struggle with the pricing because, as I said, I'm not
Hmm.
currently that I'm in Iran. I'm not working with like a normal economic thing. I mean, a lot of people, as I said, are struggling to have like the minimum things that every person should have in their life. So till now, it's really hard to like do the pricing and the logistics and everything. But I think I did a good job and I managed it sort of good. But and the thing is, because it's sort of like the people that can live the life that we do in Iran, we are so little that
Hmm.
we sort of knew all the people. I mean, not exactly knowing them, but like it's
Hmm.
a very small community, and that way, like we sort of have the Google reviews, but just with the talking.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, and I think in this way, it's like a really hard thing to do, but you have to just manage it. And I'm pretty sure that it has a lot of challenges doing this currently in Iran. But I mean,
Hmm.
here I am.
Yeah, I mean, it completely makes sense. I mean, the way you said that in the beginning, you priced it so low that you could not cut for the cost of the expenditure for the event. I think that in itself is an investment to be able to build that trust. Because especially when you say, even if you know, if it's a small community where you know the people who might end up being your potential guests at these pop-ups, I think yeah, you need to build that trust upon that so that you might have to explain a little extra the first few times, but then again, then especially if people are like imitating you and doing concepts like these, shows that people trust in the concept you've built, and people ask fewer questions, I guess, once you build that sort of a trust. But I'm also curious over here, Sormeh, like how do you see, what is your exposure first of all, because we do not know each other personally. I'm curious, like what is your exposure to professional chefs? Like do you have friends who in kitchens working in restaurants, or even if not that, have you seen, like, I don't know, Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, or seen things like The Bear or The Menu, or like, I don't know, whatever's happening in food culture and restaurants with kitchen burnouts, people leaving kitchens? Like, what is your exposure to that first of all? Do you know how real that is in Iran or beyond in the world? And how close or far is that to your reality of also being somebody who works with food?
I mean, the thing is, because this idea was like really new in Iran, it grew so fast, faster than I thought. And I sort of like came to the realization that some chefs, like some big chefs that I know, are like reaching out to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that way I started to getting to know like a lot of like really good
Mm-hmm.
chefs in Iran, and I'm really grateful for that. And me personally, I have never been to a culinary school, and I've never like before I started hosting supper clubs, I've never worked in a restaurant or anything like that, because as I said, it was not something that I had on my mind. So I never thought that I have to work in a restaurant or to go to culinary school. I mean, because I loved it. I, of course, took some courses, some online courses, made some bread courses or ice cream courses,
Mm-hmm.
but I did that just because I loved it. I never thought that I would do this for a living. So but I think after the time passed and this Sormeh Supper Club started to grow, I got to know a lot of really great chefs that were always like really good to me, and I always thought that like they were amazing and they had these ideas like that were like really impressive to me. And I was like, okay, so now these people are reaching out to me, like they know who I am. I mean, that was really a big thing for me. And in this path, I started to know a lot of like chefs and the people that have like really great restaurants.
And how do you see their lives? Like now that you know them personally, I mean, these are people who work, I don't know, 5 to 6 days a week. They work weekends, they work New Year's, they work Christmas, they work in a high, I guess, a very masculine environment with a lot of people, a lot of heat. Like, how do you see that reality of those people who might be famous or not, but they're chefs working in restaurant kitchens? Their life or their work life balance or their kind of career, their understanding of what it means to serve food from yours, because your case, I guess, you choose your times, you choose who you're going to serve, you get to choose a lot more factors than somebody working in restaurants. Have you had conversations like these with them? Because I'm very curious, because I feel what's good about being a private chef or doing these supper clubs is that you get to choose a lot of factors. You get to choose for who you cook, and you got to also choose what to cook with. You don't need to, I don't know, you don't have guests demanding things that you do not enjoy cooking. So how do you see that relation? That's why I'm curious, like, have you had these conversations or just seen them, like, even maybe not had the conversation but have said, you know what, this is where I don't want to be, or this is where I want to be?
One of the many reasons that I never wanted to own a restaurant or to run a restaurant was that I always knew that running a restaurant is
Mm-hmm.
really hard. Like you sort of have to choose between having a life and running a restaurant because
Mm-hmm.
like you have to dedicate all your time to a restaurant. I mean, during a holiday or any time of the week, you're invested in a thing that you cannot get out, and that's the thing that currently like never my goal was to have like a restaurant or anything like that. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, when you're right now that the career that made is getting bigger and bigger. I mean, it happened a lot of times that I didn't choose the time that I wanted to work because when you're in the path and you have to be professional, you have to work on New Year's, you have to work on Valentine's. So currently, if even for being I want to say that I'm not sort of like a private chef uh, because I don't like to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't accept jobs like that very often, just for like a very small amount of people that I know, and I know that they have the culture of fine dining. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
you have to have the culture to attend a fine
Yeah.
dining restaurant. I mean, you can like if you don't, the person attending a supper club will like, wow, the portion's so
Mm-hmm.
small. Like, am I gonna get full? Like
Yeah.
the things like
Of
this. So
course.
I don't accept a lot of private chefing jobs. But
Mm-hmm.
as I said, and as I mentioned earlier, like when you're in this job and you want to, like right now, I want to make this much more bigger. I'm doing this internationally and I want to make it bigger, even bigger than it is. And I have bigger goals for this business that I made. So right now, I think it doesn't have a lot of difference I don't have a lot of differences from a chef who's running a restaurant.
Right.
Maybe just I'm a little bit more free, but at the same time, I have to keep the pattern and I have to keep going and I cannot cancel
Mm.
anything like really soon.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, definitely makes sense, especially if you're doing it single-handedly. And I mean, you even if you have some help in some fronts, but you being the face of it and you being the person who runs it, I think it's a lot to handle. But also that also leads me to wonder, like, what is your source of education? Like, for example, you mentioned you look at certain topics where you need possibly more resources, and you do online courses. But there, I would like to know first of all, like, what is your source of kind of getting information, and also inspiration, because it gets a little lonely when you're the only one person ideating the menu or the theme or what ingredients to use, what to mix and match, how to deal with allergens or dietary requirements and things like that. But what is your source for inspiration? Like, how do you stay inspired to stay with the change of consumer interest and demands?
Yeah, I never thought that I was capable of creating these sort of things, and I never thought that I was a creative person at the first thing. But
Mm-hmm.
as I was proceeding in this career, I was like, okay, I think you may have I think you may have some talent, and I think you're much more capable than you think. And it's sort of like the creativity came to me, and like I was like, okay, so okay, you can curate a set menu based on this concept like naturally, and okay,
Mm-hmm.
you can be creative. So I think whenever, because my supper clubs are always different, whether it's based on a different cuisine or whether it's inspired from a concept or an idea, it always have like a story. It's not just the food. It's sort of like an experience that you have. And my goal for people that are attending the supper club is that I don't want them to leave with just a flavor. I want them to leave with a memory. So whenever I want to get inspired, I usually like brainstorm a lot. I browse in the internet for like hours and hours, for days maybe, until the idea comes to me and I can write the menu. But and I think that because one of the things that helped me a lot is that I'm really confident. And when I'm curating a menu and when I'm done with the menu, I'm like, okay, let's test this recipe. I'm pretty sure it will work out. And after some time passed, I was like, okay, now I don't even have to taste the food. I can just imagine how the textures and the flavors would go together and I can create a dish. And of course, if it's like a very large supper club or anything, I definitely test it like a lot of times. But if not, I came to this talent that I have is like I don't have to always like physically taste the food. I can like imagine it and see like how the flavors and the different textures would work together. And in that way, I would just curate and create the menu.
Yeah, super interesting. And Sarmay, like one of the big themes of the podcast itself is how chefs are kind of stepping away from the system. In your case, you didn't step into the system knowing that you had an image of the system and you felt like you could define conditions for yourself better. You could define something where you have more liberal freedom, more creative freedom to create something. But for me, it's very important that guests like you and others who've joined the podcast define what for them is to be a chef, because I feel there's a lot of people out there who want to be a chef or who want to cook or who want to do a career that involves cooking as it's something they enjoy and they would like to share that with others. But they don't really relate a lot with the definition that's out there, which only sticks to working in a restaurant. So, how would you define yourself being a chef? What makes you a chef?
What a tough question. I think whatever you do, you cannot like defer the nature of this job. Like the people that are quitting being a chef or being in an industrial kitchen, in my opinion, they cannot bear serving like a 5-course set menu for 40 people. So I just want to mention that I don't think that being a private chef or like doing some food related stuff outside the cliche and the traditional structure of being like a chef in a restaurant, it's not easier. Like, I don't think it is. In many ways, I think it's much harder because you have to serve 120 plated courses in a fine dining way that all the dishes, all the plates have to be perfect. They have to be served warm. Like in a restaurant, you plate 4 sort of plates at the same time and you serve them and you move on to the next order you get. But in a supper club or in a private dining thing, you have to serve 44 guests one dish at the same time, and the dish has to be served warm. So I know that it's not easier, but maybe in some ways even harder. And going back to the question you asked, I think the definition of me being a chef. I don't know if I don't really like to call myself a chef. But for me, like the joy that food brings people together and to share this love that I have towards food to other people, that defines everything for me. I mean, that's the whole thing that keeps me going. To share this thing that I love so much to other people, and I'm pretty sure they can taste the love that I put on all the dishes and all the things that I did. So I think for me, that defines the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm completely in agreement. I mean, you went beyond the question that I asked, which was very good for me because I feel you put a lot of focus on how, for a lot of people, I think that is also kind of what hinders people from being more creative because they feel that it's like it's going to be seen as a cakewalk. It's going to be seen as I'm choosing to quit something difficult because I can't manage it and run into something easier. But most jobs which are outside the restaurant system are the most challenging ones because you don't have a team to fall back on. You're possibly serving people for lesser cover charges. You don't have a system around it to support to make your price reasonable. You don't have, I don't know, a list of suppliers or purveyors or people running numbers for you, people recruiting people for you, or doing all these activities. So I feel, I think creating a career out of a skill, without falling into the typical way of how this works, I think that is a hell lot of creative. And yeah, thanks for bringing that point in. And also I feel of sorts, I mean, yeah, chef is just it comes from French, it's a word for somebody who's a boss, which is it just got overused into our career. But I feel it doesn't make anybody no less a cook or no less a chef if they don't work in restaurant kitchens. I feel somehow, as Dan on the podcast said earlier this year, that he said that how stupid it is that we give the most importance to the people who cook for the least amount of people for the most amount of price, and we forget everybody else who doesn't do that pattern. So yeah, it's interesting for me to hear how you defined it. And also I was a little interested, especially in your profile when I was looking at it, to hear from you, because I think it's something you're experimenting, something you're trying out. As you said, you have bigger aspirations for this project that you're doing. On how's the role of social media, like, because there's a lot of things that have happened, especially with the podcast. I've learned, like when I used to do the podcast 3 years ago, there was no chat GPT, there was no images to be created with AI, so I had very few tools to be able to scale this up. It took me a lot more time to scale this up, whereas today it's definitely not easy, but I have some help thanks to AI, thanks to learning a little more about social media. You don't need to be a developer, for example, to write codes and things like that. But in your perspective or your context of things that you do in your day to day, business, how important do you see social media? Because I love the reel that you made about water supper clubs, also the one you made about shrimp toast, and that's how actually I connected to you. How do you see that?
I think social media is really important. Like most of the connections that I think of were made out of social media. And for me, like I really want to work on my social media. And the two reels that you mentioned were sort of like the newer era of social media for my account because I wanted to elevate it. I wanted to make it bigger. And as I mentioned, a lot of people ask me because I can do like the reels in Farsi as well, but I don't want Iran to limit me. I want because I'm doing it sort of internationally as well, and I want to do it more internationally, like as the business grows. I wanna make the reels in English so people, for example, you when we're saying like
Exactly.
if I made the reel in my own language, like I wouldn't have met you and I wouldn't be standing here recording a podcast with you. So I think it's really important because
Definitely.
you make a lot of good connections on Instagram, and the thing that I think really made me grow was social media indeed because it gives you the connections of and it sort of like people get to know you towards something that's on like we check our phone like all the time. Like it's sort of like it's a really easy way for people to get to know you through social media. And I think if someone's starting a business, they should really definitely try to work on their social media.
No, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's super cool. I would say anybody who's listening, I'll put Sormeh's links down there. I think you should go check it out. Maybe be it for inspiration, be it for actually knowing a little more about the person you're listening to. And I think it's great stuff you're doing. And yeah, it makes complete sense that you do in English, and especially the format you do. I feel it was something which caught my eye, and it caught my algorithm, which is only about fugitive chefs. So it makes complete sense. It reached the right sort of people. And sometimes it's not about the people who could come dine. Maybe hopefully I can get to dine at one of your concepts.
Yeah, I'm coming to Europe. Maybe you can.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna be perfect. Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
definitely look it up. But also, it exposes you to a bigger public, which whose purpose might not be to dine at your place, but getting to know you. And I think, especially with a single person oriented business, it's very important to build that image. And I think social media lets you do that in a not an easy way, but I think easier way than it was to go door to door and give a pamphlet about
yeah,
yourself.
exactly.
And moving on towards the end of the podcast, Sormeh, I wanted to ask you, how does success look like for you? Because again, with restaurants and chefs in restaurants, it's mostly about scaling up to a different restaurant, maybe from a one Michelin star to a two Michelin star. For a restaurant itself, it is about being in 50 best or winning accolades and things like that. For you, when you are kind of having this vision for your concept internationally, what are some things you're looking at to kind of define, even if not I mean, not a point where you would say, I'm successful, I'm going to stop, but like, what are the next few milestones for yourself?
I think as I said, like the supper clubs and private dinings are evolving. I think it's sort of like a new art form where like food, design, and like storytelling becomes one. And for me personally, I want to like keep pushing those boundaries and maybe in the future, like collaborate with designers, musicians, like galleries to make this like truly an immersive experience. And I don't want them to leave with just a flavor. I want them to leave with a memory and to make it more immersive and to see it as an experience, not just a dinner. That's like the whole goal for me.
Yeah, no, super interesting. I think I can already think of some people I could connect you with. I think it's cool to see when somebody's creative at one art and then bringing somebody else who's good at that at their own art. I think fusing these two disciplines, it's always beautiful things come out of it. And yeah, I can't wait to hear more about when we see what's going on with, especially when you come down to Europe and the things you do around here. And just to be able to close this podcast, Sormeh, because we could keep talking forever on the tips you can give about starting off what you did and things like that. But to stick to the format of the podcast, I wanted to ask to you that if there are people listening, maybe there is another Sormeh who's in a full time job, finishing her degree into some other discipline which is not cooking. What sort of advice would you give to that person, or to somebody who's leaving restaurants and thinks it's too brave? Maybe Sormeh can do it, but I don't see myself as somebody who can do that. What sort of advice would you give to those people? And yeah, any other tips you could give to people listening out there?
I think you just have to know that you're much more capable than you think. You just have to put yourself in that situation and you see how you spark and how you grow and how talented you get. Just the thing is, you just have to start. You have to start it. It doesn't have to be perfect. But maybe it's not even about food. If it's anything else, just start it and just do it, and you'll get surprised of how capable you are, and how you will you will understand that. And the way, like, the ways will come to you. You don't have to like know everything in the beginning. I never thought that would, as I said, I never thought that my business would grow this big. But here I am. So you just have to start it, and you don't have to like think about the whole path that you're going. In a way, like everything will come to you, and you will figure everything out step by step. You will. I'm pretty sure you can. The person who's listening to this, I'm pretty sure you can do this. So just start it.
Yeah, that's the last words we need to hear, I guess. Yes, I think I'm completely in agreement with what you say, and I see the smile on your face, and I see that those emotions coming out through also, because I think it's in retrospective when you listen to yourself as well, giving advice to others, and you having started this 2 years ago. I think it's very powerful, especially when it comes from somebody who has walked the path and not just somebody giving an advice and hasn't done that themselves. So yeah, I would like to thank you first of all, Sormeh, for sharing your story, for showing that it's very powerful to see that food can be also as impactful or even more outside the whole restaurant world, outside the whole ecosystem which is meant to build it, and to see that it's very successful when it's driven by passion. People, I think the community concept that you said, I think is very important, to build it around the people that you believe understand your product, you believe they care about your product as much as you do. And also passion, of course, at the end of the day, to kind of the words you said, to start it. And yeah, we'll link to your work and supper clubs in the show notes. But thank you so much, Sormeh, for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Furqan, for having me. I had so much fun. Thank you again.
This has been Fugitive Chefs, and thanks for listening, everybody.